Picture. Could you talk about your experience working together or like working with great, interesting music?
Yeah, I think working together is beneficial for the way that my life is structured. So I need a little bit of asynchronous, like learning time and note taking, and then like gut checking my suppositions given like the material.
Mm.
So it's nice to have one-on-one time and also see what everyone else is working on and just like my own sort of note taking, heads down, go out and try some stuff time. It is kind of multidisciplinary. There's so many different styles of learners, and we all talk about music in different ways. And what I had difficulties with like a traditional model is just like it's very strict. So I always get the context of like here's the music theory word or like music school word for this idea, but I get to like still be colorful with how I'm describing stuff and that still gets across. There's never like a mute uh conversation where we're not understanding each other.
That's really good to hear. Yeah. So kind of like zooming back, could you like talk a little bit about how you kind of came across me and how you came across the program and what it was like for you to get involved and stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't know how I got recommendations, but I feel like I got a YouTube recommendation somehow. But I followed you after we met, and I think I was looking for venues. And then, yeah, you kind of popped up in my suggested. So I ended up watching a few videos and was like, oh, this is really helpful. And, there's this classroom where I can kind of like understand at least like foot in the door principles.
Mhm.
And I blew through those, and I think I reached out to you or you reached out to me. Um, and yeah, the rest is history. I mean, it was fun to have access to that first bit and learn about how the teachings are structured and then just be like, oh, this like, you know, works well with the way that I like to learn. So, and also having like a couple of free calls where we could just like hang out and work through, um, yeah, the like principles of phase one.
Totally. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, so I'd love to hear like how you feel like your music making is changing or has changed as a result of like working together, whether it's like from a guitaristic standpoint, just like getting a bunch of the guitar questions answered, or kind of bigger picture, or both.
Yeah, I mean, guitar wise, you really do unlock the fretboard. Um, and it's fun, I guess, like just going through the entire timeline. Um, you have, and I think you set a really good expectation of being like, hey, there's going to be these kind of like gray moments where you've taken in so much that it just is a lot more to consider.
Hmm.
And there's so much more that's possible. And that in terms of like my creative process became, a new set of muscles that I was working. So there's like a ramp up period where you're like, okay, like I have to, or I can consider this or this. And it's like you discover new rabbit holes. But you also, once you start to deal with all of the rabbit holes that kind of manifest after learning, you develop like new systems. So like I've had a tried and true system for music making for a very long time. um, but also like areas I've never explored or felt like there was a barrier to entry that just kind of like turned me off of it. And
Mm.
so being able to put in the time to understand these things that I had been avoiding has opened up the ability to, dive in and be like, oh yeah, I want to understand how counterpoint works, or I want to be able to like name notes in a key or chords in a key, or how different scales work. And yeah, it's fun to put it in practice in a way where I still get to like check up on an idea. So I have work that I do for music that I've been making,
Mhm.
and I'm in the process of playing a show, and it's really fun to just be like, oh, I'm this far along, and this is where I'm stuck, and I'm trying to apply this, and here's what I came up with, and get feedback. So it's been really cool. Everybody that I play with or in front of, because I play guitar a lot, are like noticing the changes in the style of music that I'm playing, which is cool.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, okay, cool. And so it sounds like with all of this, there's like the just like the basics of sort of the more like music school or music theory stuff.
You discover new rabbit holes, but you also, once you start to deal with all of the rabbit holes that kind of manifest after learning, you develop like new systems. So like I've had a tried and true system for music making for a very long time, um, but also like areas I've never explored or felt like there was a barrier to entry that just kind of like turned me off of it. And
Hmm.
so being able to put in the time to understand these things that I had been avoiding has opened up the ability to, dive in and be like, oh yeah, I want to understand how counterpoint works, or I want to be able to like name notes in a key or chords in a key, or how different scales work. And yeah, it's fun to put it in practice in a way where I still get to like check up on an idea. So I have work that I do for music that I've been making,
Mhm.
and I'm in the process of playing a show, and it's really fun to just be like, oh, I'm this far along, and this is where I'm stuck, and I'm trying to apply this, and here's what I came up with, and get feedback. So it's been really cool. Everybody that I play with or in front of, because I play guitar a lot, are like noticing the changes in the style of music that I'm playing, which is cool.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, okay, cool. And so it sounds like with all of this, there's like the just like the basics of sort of the more like music school or music theory stuff, like knowing keys or like intervals or like there was some counterpoint stuff that you mentioned, and then also like
Mhm.
learning the fretboard. And so just to kind of get into that like a little bit more, like it feels like you're feeling a lot more like rock solid about that. Like, does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. I
Yeah,
mean, I have a lot of notes, so it's always easy to go back if there's a specific consideration I'd like to like apply to a song.
totally. Yeah.
And then there's just a lot of muscle memory. So there's stuff that's like locked in where it's like, okay, I can quickly and easily discover different positions in which I can play something and like
Yeah.
pay attention to register. And also, yeah, we've kind of just built a template of like, I want to focus on this leading voice within all of these strings, and that will be the kind of like groove box or like groove maker with this big jumble of sounds. Before it was like all gut based for the most part. I would just like make stuff and be like, this sounds awesome. But I'm also stuck. I can't like break out of the structures of songs that I was making were just like
Yeah.
pretty uniform throughout. And I
Mhm.
feel like now I can experiment with like variety a lot more.
It's good to hear. Yeah,
Yeah.
and also kind of for the sake of the recording, because like I know a bit about the life that you've had like as a musician before we started working together. Yeah, it would just be cool. Because when you're talking about having made music for a long time and stuff like that, kind of for people who might come across this later, like what's your journey in music been like up until this point?
Pretty cool. I don't know. I started recording music. I started playing guitar when I was 12 or 13.
Mhm.
My dad opted to give me lessons, and we shared an acoustic for a long time. So it was a cool bonding experience. And then around 18, you have a breakup, and then started recording. I was like, all right, cool. I'm just gonna like post stuff on MySpace. And I set a pretty aggressive goal of recording a song a week, and I did that for about a year, which was really awesome. Got noticed, got a write-up in the like local periodical in my hometown, and then played my first show, went on my first tour, went to college, played a bunch of gigs, started a record label, started recording friends. So I was familiar with like production and like the business of music.
Hmm.
Um, and then, yeah, eventually got a career. And so music was no longer this like main staple of my life. And still recorded and play a show here and there, but eventually hit a point where I have probably like over 12 hours of recorded music. And listening to it, I was just like, I'd really like to have more work that I'm making that I am not just saying, oh, this is a moment in time. I recorded it. It doesn't sound necessarily the way I would like it. Maybe I should have put a little more time into the arrangement itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think just getting to that point and understanding that, I was like, I probably should put something into this other than YouTube and like self-study. I think as a learner, I get frustrated or certain challenges that have a lot of technical nuance
Hmm.
um, can kind of dissuade me from pursuing it any further.
Yeah.
It's a miracle that I like learned to program and got into software because it was so frustrating for like the first 2 years. And so yeah, it's nice to have the ability to have a teacher in this day and age where like I don't have to go to a music shop and talk to this guy for an hour and try to get all this conversation in and then head all the way back home. Like I can jump on a call or, turn on this course material, slam through a bunch of stuff and ask questions in the platform or just like text you and then like set up a call and go over very specific things. So
Yeah.
um, it's a cool modern convenience.
Totally. Yeah, okay. And so you've had this whole journey through music and you've done all of this stuff. Yeah, and then like when you were thinking about trying to kind of get more kind of baseline context for some of the stuff you're making, whether it's like the music theory stuff or like fretboard stuff. Yeah, could you like did you have like or could you walk me through some of the hesitations that you had around more kind of traditional like guitar teacher down the street models?
Yeah, I mean, the price, it's expensive. And finding the right type of teacher, you'd have to just kind of like have a few sessions, and figure out if it's working or not.
Yeah,
Um, and a lot of the teachers at the shop down the street might not necessarily have the interests that I do.
yeah,
It's really cool to constantly have this overlap where I'm like, oh yeah, I've been into this for a long time. I'd love to apply this, and it's something that you have already mulled over, digested, understand, and can like, convey back to me and be like, oh yeah, here's some principles behind it. This is how it applies to what you're learning, that sort of thing.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, and so related to that, are there things about me specifically as a teacher that have you feeling like this is a good fit?
I like all the book recommendations and all of the references to like music that is applying to the thing that we're discussing. So I can
Yeah,
like just put it on ambiently and be like, yeah, this is, how this comes into play. Um, you're always available and considerate of like the group. So if there's multiple people, it's like, okay, let's set an agenda, uh, person A, person B, person C. Let's, kind of round robin, um, check up consistently uh, in terms of like expressing things and then be like, do you understand this? Is there something that's still vague? Um, yeah, and I like the shared doc, note taking, all of that stuff.
yeah. Cool. And so from for like where you are now, given that we've been working together for I guess like 5 months or so at this point, I think. 4 months, something like that. Yeah, for what you're doing now, like for the things that are ahead, like now that we've covered a lot of the more kind of basic, like or not basic, but the more fundamental like fretboard stuff. And we're talking about different types of like creative processes. You're working on like a live set where we've spent some time really digging into like the outro to Only Shallow by My Bloody Valentine, which is super fun. yeah, I'm curious about like what like if you have a different sense of like what's possible in your music making now that we've kind of gone through this process.
For sure. I mean, like using non-guitar instruments was a lot more of a shot in the dark. So now that I understand how to make music with intention on the guitar, I can apply that to any other instrument. So like I started playing shakuhachi and it's like because I understand intervals, I can create like a series of notes that is more interesting than just climbing around and, like jumping. Um, and yeah, it's like I've been able to not only just like take what I've learned and apply it wherever,
Hmm.
um, but I've got all of these mental markers for things that like I've done in the past, but I never knew what it was, or I've heard about, but I could never talk about it.
Hmm.
So like, you know, uh, taking a lap around the musical block allows you to orient yourself with like, oh, if I go here and look this up, I'll know what to find. Like it's the same thing with programming. Like once you understand how code works, I can understand a new language without knowing it. I'll just be like, oh, I need to create a loop that, iteratively performs this action. So yeah, it's like I have that principle of coding, and now I can, apply those principles to anything.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. What else? There's so much good stuff here. Thank you for all of this. Yeah, so one other thing that's just kind of crossing my mind, and yeah, I mean, thanks for doing this. Thanks for your time. Is with some of the guest workshops, like yeah, I think you might have joined, yeah, during a wave where we were doing like a lot of guest workshops in a pretty small period of time. Like, yeah, I'd love to hear about your experience with those.
It's been awesome. So one of the guest workshops was with a studio engineer, and I had a ton of burning questions. I have a friend who is an engineer as well, but I don't get to pick his brain as much as I'd like. Um, and I think what was really cool was he kind of offered up his time at the end and was like, "Hey, if you want to work together, let me know." He ended up mastering my album, which is coming out soon, and he was super helpful. So like being able to talk to artists about a specific topic that they have spent a lot of time in, um, outside of just like music theory. So it's like, oh, this is everything that I do in order to prep a release, and here's all the press that I'll put in, and um, here's everything that I'll do when I'm going into session, and what I do in post, and how I'm thinking about like the current climate of production and mastering and sound, from someone who's won a Grammy. It's like it's pretty sick.
It's good to hear. Awesome. So one of the things that you mentioned was sort of the community aspect of the program. Like, yeah, I'd love to hear more about like what you've gotten from the community aspect of of the program. And like, some people hear it and they're like, yes, and other people are skeptical of like group lessons or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to hear what your experience has been like.
Well, I mean, I think I was initially skeptical when I was like, I need one-on-one time. I don't want to have to sit and wait. But like being able to see other people's journeys is like encouraging, and you get to offer help. And like there's just stuff in every conversation that is worth paying attention to. Even with like more of the less seasoned students, I'm like, oh yeah, I should be using a metronome and pay attention to timing and um, yeah, uh, apply this in my own music making. So I haven't had any confirmation of my initial fears. Like I was like, oh, maybe I won't get enough time. Maybe it'll be too like random. Everybody's focusing on a different thing and none of it. I'll just have to kind of like mute and zone out for whatever period of time until it's my turn. So yeah, I'd say it's all been uh, net positive in terms of having a group of people that have a shared goal um, being able to answer questions sometimes and just like pepper stuff in and be like, oh yeah, like I've done this before. I've climbed this hill. Here's what I got out of it. Um, and yeah, getting feedback from them as well. So like just being able to share stuff. We do lots of things that aren't necessarily just school based either. It's like, oh, here's some cool shows. Here's some music that applies to module two or whatever. So it's nice to, yeah, just I don't know. I think a good musician will take things from everything. Um, so even if it's not a style of music that I prefer to play, I'll be like, oh yeah, like I can keep it super simple, or you know, this person is doing this, like Sam is sharing her recordings, and I'm like, oh, like this is an awesome use of variety, and I can see what I would tweak if I was like editing the song myself, and like, yeah, I want to take what she's doing and use that in my own thing. So it's been
Yeah,
cool.
awesome. Okay, yeah, I've got two other questions going off of this. So one is that like you'd mentioned, you were doing a lot of like you made a lot of music on your own before we started working together.
Mhm.
And we touched on this when we first started this call, but I feel like now that we're kind of deeper into it and we have some context and stuff, I think um yeah, it might be worth touching on it again. So like yeah, you mentioned kind of, you had your own relationship to music making. You kind of had your own sort of terminology. And one of the things that we talked about when we started working together was that that sort of terminology that you had didn't necessarily like align with sort of like music theory language, or there was sort of a communication gap between where you were at and maybe where potential collaborators would be at. And something that you'd mentioned was that it's I've been able to play a role of sort of connecting you to this more kind of like conventional language while allowing you to really pay attention to your own sort of inclinations and like tastes and sort of aesthetic preferences, and hopefully build some confidence. Or I think you were already feeling pretty good about it, but like feel maybe self-assuredness about being able to trust those instincts while still communicating with people. Like, could you talk a little bit about my role in that?
The role in developing new instincts, or
Or sorry, it's kind of a long question. Of like just like I guess getting you in touch with music theory or whatever, but still really respecting your voice and like helping you develop and develop that without, like saying this chord progression's wrong or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been cool to actively take notes. Like, I think signing up for a class makes you take it seriously,
Yeah.
as opposed to just kind of passively trying to learn things.
Yeah.
And so in taking it seriously, I'll be able to jot down like, oh, this is what this actually means in music theory language. And so yeah, in terms of like my experience in getting the right information as opposed to just like not touching on it at all, it's been net positive. It's like always good to have the right terms in your back pocket, and like you were saying, like knowing, its proper term or its Latin term or its Italian term, gives you a new way to think about it. That just kind of like shifts the angle at which you're like looking at all this stuff. So, um, yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. Yeah, and so I have one other question, which is because when I work with people, it's kind of a commitment. It's for a longer period of time. Like what would you say to somebody who's interested in joining but is kind of on the fence or is unsure about kind of taking the leap?
I'd say think about what your goals are and express them. I mean, I think that's a common interview question when you're kind of doing like intake with someone is highly curating what they're hoping to get out of this investment. Um, it's worth a lot more than the price tag, I would imagine. Like going and doing the work in these institutions and taking this knowledge back is a long process. And like being able to get that in a straight shot without having the rigidness of music school
Yeah.
is like a perfect fit for people who don't want to pay six figures and have to, bend over backwards and do all these like late nights, uh, putting in all the work that the professor needs. It's like, oh yeah, I want to learn, but I don't want to just try it on YouTube. Like, I want to have a teacher. I want to get feedback. I want to have challenges that apply to what I'm learning and a group of people around me who are doing the same thing. Um, yeah, it's really beneficial.
Totally.
I would say if I'm talking to like someone who's hesitant face to face, I'd say yeah, just talk with Cole and figure it out. Um, it's not it's not as unstructured as you might think. Like there's so much flexibility with what you're learning and the right amount of standardized learnings. So like you do truly kind of get the best of both worlds. There's never like a moment where we're talking about something and like you don't know exactly what I'm talking about and have like five things to say about it. Um, so that's yeah, I think it is like what you've done is you've created a model that I would love to do with other things I'd like to learn, like um, I'll have to explore the shakuhachi teaching world and see if I can find a teacher as good as you.
Wow. Thank you. That's really good to hear. It's high praise.